When I think of Netflix's Ozark, a few different words spring to mind. Tension, chaos, stakes. But while the plot can sometimes feel a little out of control as there's an increasing number of moving parts, I actually think it's some of the best character writing on TV right now. Not because the characters always make the most sensible decision available, as they definitely don't, but because the unpredictable, even frustrating decisions they do make are true to their character. It's in line with who they are, their temperament, and what they value most, as opposed to who they should be to deal with this situation the best. Ozark positioned itself as a potential successor to Breaking Bad, openly offering the same brand of televised conflict and drama that comes from drug cartels and money laundering. You could even accuse Ozark of comfortably standing in Breaking Bad's shadow. On paper, some of the characters feel similar in terms of the role they play, but there are key differences in how the drama unfolds, which really changes the feeling of the entire series. Breaking Bad was all about outsmarting the authorities. The police are painted as relatively incorruptible, so the characters just have to throw them off the scent. Whereas Ozark paints the police as easily paid off, so the biggest drug lords don't need to hide in plain sight. They're openly brutal known figures, and as the seasons continue, it puts forth that on the federal side of things, the US government are willing to cut deals to let the war of drugs persist, as opposed to genuinely attempting to shut it down once and for all. Unlike Walter White, Marty Bird's family are also aware of his money laundering schemes, as the danger is too clear and present to keep a secret. Whereas Breaking Bad created conflict from the secrecy of Walt's criminal activity, Ozark blew the lid off that quickly, and now even the children are involved in the family business, just to keep their heads above water, becoming more and more like their parents in the process. But I would say the biggest difference is that Breaking Bad prides itself on its rationality or cutthroat strategizing, that Walt always makes the most tactical or logical choice, and the characters tend to have some sense of shared understanding of one another. Generally speaking, if you're too important to kill, you'll remain alive. But you must be providing value at all times, as money, power, and not getting caught by the police is a value that all the characters on the criminal side of things share. Whereas Ozark's unique quality is that no one shares the same values, codes, or temperaments, and each season expands the bandwidth of characters in each organization. They may speak the same language, but they don't really understand one another. Not everyone is trying to climb a ladder all the time as their MO. Some people just want to stay still or get by. There are alliances between characters, but they're far more to do with relationships and trust than automatically about cash, which makes their decisions far less predictable. Whereas Breaking Bad was all about how the characters will get out of this seemingly impossible situation, Ozark is more about what else could go wrong that's going to disrupt things even more, as there's so many different organizations at play with competing and conflicting interests. Let's look at some examples of this. Now, there are going to be some spoilers from Ozark's 4th season, part 1, so if you haven't already watched it, then this is probably time for you to tune out. This season added a few new characters and complications throughout. For me, the most intriguing addition is the private investigator, who's trying to figure out what happened to Helen. As such, he lurks, intrudes, and eavesdrops, trying to piece together who all the characters are and the dynamics at play between them, as that will lead him to the truth. This creates a consistent tension throughout the season, but what's interesting about this to me is that it makes us see the inner workings of the character dynamics from an outsider's perspective, which gives the audience a deeper understanding of what they're really watching unfold. Between the FBI, the cartel, Darlene, and Ruth, the Bird family are the center point of all of these competing interests. Given Marty is a mathematical money laundering whiz, his side of it is all about calculation, not just of numbers, but people and time. Wendy comes from politics, so she's all about the veneer, hiding the truth from the public. These two skill sets essentially process, launder, and manage everyone else's expectations and goals. On the one hand, you have Navarro and the drug cartel, who threaten to murder them at any time, which sets the stakes clearly that they must take priority over everyone else. On the other hand, you have Maya with the FBI, who, if caught, could arrest them. This creates an understandable and basic motivation that exists within any crime series: don't get killed by the criminals, and don't get arrested by the cops. But within each organization, there are different rules and ranks, and the inner workings of these competing interests, coupled with the character's temperaments and values, creates a unique brand of chaos that constantly ratchets up the pressure on the birds to clean up the mess without tripping over any wires. For example, on the cartel side, Omar Navarro's nephew Javi wants to take over, which changes how Omar behaves. While Omar is cold-blooded, he's more strategic and can be reasoned with as long as you provide him value. Whereas Javi is more emotional and reckless, happy to wipe out the local sheriff without understanding the role that they played within the local drug scene. This is because Javi operates out of ego. He believes he's more important than everyone else because the cartel is more dangerous than everyone else. His frustration with not realizing his ambitions of being head of the cartel yet makes him even more destructive. On the FBI side, Maya has a newborn baby and wants to believe that her and the government are a force for good in the world. When she discovers that the FBI is also just an interest group maintaining itself, she goes rogue, cancelling the agreements with Navarro. This is not a rational choice, as it goes against her superiors at work and also puts her in serious danger with the cartel. But it's who she is as a character, it's how she wants the world to be as a new mother. So she rebels against the system as it's not in line with her values. And that's a key to understanding Ozark's writing. Characters don't always act rationally because they're human. Instead, they tend to act in line with their emotional attachments and values. For instance, when Wendy allowed Ben to die, Ruth separated herself from the Birds family business and joined Darlene. Not because working with the Birds isn't more profitable and a better opportunity than working with Darlene, but because she loved Ben and can't be around anyone who is willing to let him die. Ruth has already sacrificed so much since she started working with Marty, but her connection with Ben is what gave her life light and meaning. It changed her. Throughout the 4th season, Ruth begins to wonder why she's even staying here, as her only remaining emotional attachment is Wyatt. Darlene is trusted by Wyatt, but she's also not a rational actor. Although the cartel value money and power above all else, Darlene has a different code. It's all about trust and protecting her family's values, which can basically be summed up as her boyfriend Wyatt and her baby Zeke. However, Darlene's temperament is much more ruthless and reckless than almost anyone, killing a driver who tried to blackmail her as he believed he had the upper hand, and even Frank Sr. As shocking as it was for Darlene to kill Frank Sr., it is in line with her character, as she consistently wipes out anyone who makes themselves seem like a persistent problem to her interests, meaning her family and the business that keeps them afloat. This scene should have just been a conversation, but because of the collision of interests, values, and temperaments, it ends in murder. Wyatt is also someone who doesn't make decisions based on pure rationality, but emotional attachment. After seeing Darlene commit these heinous acts and having to clean up after her, the rational decision is to leave, and he does initially plan to, so he's not immune to reason. But once he discovers that baby Zeke will be taken away from Darlene and put into foster care, his family values trump everything else, and he does what he needs to do to keep the family together and safe. This doesn't make his decision irrational, it's just that without that emotional attachment, he would have no other reason to stay. But emotionally, his reason to stay becomes stronger than his reason to leave. Until the two most ruthless characters with the worst temperaments come into direct conflict with one another, and Wyatt is now wiped out too. These shocking moments are what Ozark is known for. Meaningful characters can be wiped out in an instant due to the characters' different perspectives and values. In Javi's mind, Wyatt is nothing but an extra, an accessory, a witness, whereas to Ruth, he's the most important person in her life. And for the audience, Ruth is one of the most important people in the show. This sets Ruth on a path toward revenge, not because that's the most logical choice, as technically she's in even more danger now than ever before, but because Wyatt is the person who mattered most to her, and as she loses more and more people that she values, her life has less meaning, and therefore, she has less to lose. Ozark's writing perfectly balances a range of temperaments that heavily influence the plot. On one side, there are strategic characters that make decisions based on cold calculation, And on the other side, there's fiery characters that make decisions based on emotion and instinct. And then there's other characters in the middle of the spectrum who appear logical until they become emotionally compromised. This is where there's an internal battle between their interests and their values. Their interests are things that logically benefit them, and their values determine whether those benefits mean as much to them as something else. For instance, even within the bird family, who are usually the most calculated, Wendy often makes decisions based on pride and ego. She deflects responsibility for what happened with Ben, as it conflicts with her core values. In her mind, it was a calculated and unavoidable decision. So as a means of dealing with that internal inconsistency, she begins publicly lying about it to create a false reality for her to exist in outside of the home, as in the home, she's getting so much grief from Jonah about her decision. Jonah doesn't have the emotional temperament to understand that maybe there was no other real option on the table, so he rebels against his mother, not because it's expedient for the family's needs, not because it puts him in less danger, but because of his emotional attachment to Ben, as well as his values. As if we aren't fighting to keep even our family alive, then what's the point in any of this? Now, all of this could sound like a borderline criticism that some of the characters behave irrationally, but it's really not, because in real life, no one behaves rationally all the time. The characters being more flawed just makes them more human. A lot of the time we view self-interest as rationality, and rationality becomes synonymous with being profitable or about survival. But Ozark's characters do still act in their own self-interest. It's just that their best interests aren't always about power, money, or survival, but their loyalties, attachments, and values. They also react to situations in their own temperament, not based on the most logical way to get out of trouble, but based on who they are as people and their experiences up until that point. That's solid character writing, and all comes together to create a unique form of chaos that's both high stakes and insanely tense, because it's hard to predict. From a writing perspective, instead of always ensuring that the characters make the smartest choice available, you should ask yourself, what would this character be able to think of based on who they're trying to protect the most? Because they're unlikely to seriously consider any option that intrudes on those values. Because it's not about what's logical to you, it's about what matters most to them. If you enjoy content like this and want to see more of it, please do consider supporting me on Patreon, as it really does make a difference to how much content I can pump out. Or if you can't afford that, then simply like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment down below to help the algorithm do its thing.